struck the North Tower, she was slammed into the marble wall and set on fire by the explosion. Her right arm was covered in scars from the burns. She said that she saw her assistant decapitated in front of her, and as she encountered others who were horribly injured, she attempted to save them. One man who lay dying, she said, gave her a diamond wedding ring and begged her to give it to his fiancée. According to witnesses, Tricia had been seen walking with a man near the corner of Leland and Ashland Avenues. The man was in his early 30s, around 6 feet tall, and weighed approximately 200 pounds. He had brown hair and a moustache. Tricia and the man were then seen getting into a blue 4-door car, most likely a 1979 Dodge or Pontiac, with damage on the right front door. Some of the witnesses thought that there had been a second man already inside the car when Tricia got in, but no one was able to provide a description of him. Police focused on trying to find the man seen talking with Tricia and the blue car. One particularly observant neighbour noted that the licence plate started with the letters QR, and patrol cars were instructed to keep an eye out for the vehicle. Her tragic story of not only surviving but being badly injured, helping others, and ending up in a widow of sorts brought tears to everyone's eyes. And while it's a rarely recognised and never condoned in certain support groups, there does often emerge a kind of hierarchy of trauma. The person with the worst story often becomes the star of the group. This was definitely the case with Head. While she consistently assured others that their stories were just as valid as hers, she also took full advantage of the attention and sympathy. She became a powerhouse for the group, organising meetings, scheduling speakers, hosting events, and even getting the group recognised as a non-profit and securing funding. She often paid for expenses out of her own pocket. Within 6 months of joining, Head was clearly running the group. Its founder, Bogaches, soon found that people were beginning to lose confidence in him as a leader, thanks to a whisper campaign against him that was started by Head. At the next board election, he lost his bid for re-election. In his place, Head was voted in and given the new title of President of the WTCSN. As president, she soon became the face of the Survivors Network, recalling her experience in media interviews and public events. She also worked tirelessly on the survivors' behalf. At that time, the survivors were not allowed into Ground Zero, so Head, using her newfound fame, arranged for the survivors to finally visit the site and pay their respects. In 2005, she was chosen to lead tours for the trip question someone who had been through so much. Other discrepancies began to show up as well. Sometimes she would claim that she was working for Merrill Lynch on September 11th. Other times that she was working for Morgan Stanley. Sometimes she would refer to Dave as her husband, and other times as her fiancé. An understandable enough discrepancy, since she probably felt as though they were already married. But one member was a little suspicious about her story about Dave. Head never shared any pictures of him, and his family was never present at any meetings or public events. When he asked her Dave's last name, she gave it to him. He looked it up and saw that indeed a man by that name had died in the 9/11 attack. However, as he read Dave's obituaries and newspaper articles, he saw no mention of his engagement with Head or anyone else. There was also no mention of his supposedly recent trip to Hawaii either. This made the group members suspicious, but like Bogaz, he felt it would be cruel to question her about these details, and so he kept his doubts to himself. Although the investigation into Tricia's disappearance remained active, detectives never made any real progress on the case. Tricia's photo was featured on milk cartons in 1985, which brought in reports of several potential sightings of her, but all of them led to dead ends. Both of Tricia's parents spent the rest of their lives convinced that their daughter was alive somewhere, and made it their mission to bring her home. Unfortunately, they both died without ever knowing what happened to Tricia. As far as they and the rest of the public knew, police had never had any suspects and had no idea what might have happened to Tricia. They were wrong. In 2018, NBC took an interest in the cold case and filed a request under the Freedom of Information Act to gain access to the case file. What they learned was shocking. Shortly after Tricia went missing, police identified Marvin Ponterelli as a person of interest. He was the registered owner of a blue car that matched the description of the one witnesses saw Tricia get into in that Friday afternoon, and he matched the description of the man seen walking with her. He had an extensive criminal background that included charges of rape, kidnapping and sexual assault. He was brought in for questioning the day after Tricia went missing, and he failed a polygraph examination about her disappearance. Police were certain they had the person responsible for abducting Tricia. 3 days after the disappearance, 3 separate witnesses picked Ponterelli out of a lineup, convinced he was the man they had seen with Tricia. Despite the positive identification, Ponterelli was never charged in Tricia's case. He was arrested for several different crimes, including corruption of a minor and child pornography, but these charges were dropped about 6 months later. The children involved refused to testify against him, and it was commonly believed that Ponterelli had brought their silence as their families suddenly had access to large amounts of cash. Marvin Ponterelli's name would continue to be mentioned in reference Illinois property. Later, he would retract all these statements and say that he thought Larry Fassler had taken Tricia to Mexico and he didn't know what happened to her after that. No charges were ever filed against either Larry or Marvin in Tricia's case. Ponterelli died in an Arizona prison in 1994, and Chicago police are convinced that he was the person responsible for killing Tricia. They believe that he buried her body in the foundation of the Ponterelli apartments. They were in the initial stages of construction at the time Tricia went missing. The information NBC uncovered with their FOIA request makes it clear that police believe Tricia was killed almost immediately after she was abducted, but this was never relayed to the public. Tricia's parents and siblings were never made aware of the fact that there was a suspect in the case, nor did they know police believed Tricia had been murdered. Both Dorothy Jo and Brad died without ever learning what might have happened to their daughter, and Tricia's siblings were shocked when they learned of the information that had been kept secret. However, in later years, the story about her arm would change. She would sometimes say that she was with